When I was growing up, my dad was the chief of police for like the majority of my life in my town of Bowie, Texas. And if you were ever to go to my parents' home, you would go down a long dirt road, and the first stop on this dirt road would be my grandmother's house, my dad's mom. And oftentimes he would stop there to check on her or do some like housework on the way home because it's on the way and it's his mom. So I remember one time I was very young, and my dad normally doesn't drive like police cruisers. He always had like a fancier car that didn't have people in the back. So this time he was in a police cruiser, and I was like, this is super cool. This is probably the first time I actually physically remember there being a police radio there with all like the hubbub and the 10-4 good buddies and whatever they're saying to each other. I could hear everything going around, and I was like, this is so dope. And right there was a little transmitter that you could hold, and you could hold the little button, and you could say whatever you want. The entire police station, all of Bowie, Texas, who had that radio could hear it. And my dad one time pulled up into the driveway of his mother's house, and he looked at me and was like, I'm going to go in for just a little bit. He's like, don't touch that radio. He's like, you can do whatever you want. You can roll down the windows. You can stick your butt out of the car. I don't care. Just take your shirt off, whatever you want to do. Don't touch the radio. I had one rule to follow. And I was going to do pretty good at it, right? Like I was just sitting there, and I was seeing this thing, and I was hearing people's voices that I actually recognized from the police station the time I spent up there, not incarcerated, but because my dad works there. And I would hear different things, and I was just kind of interested by it, but I was abiding by my dad's rule until, and I don't remember what they said distinctly. Okay, but I remember hearing some mumbling like, Chief Scruggs. Okay? One more time. Chief Scruggs. And I was like, oh my God. And it kind of, to me, in my memory at least, sounded a little bit urgent. So I was just like, something's going on, and they need Chief Scruggs. They need my dad. And I'm like, I don't want Bowie to fall apart because my dad's not answering this thing. So I just reached for the radio. And I was just like, yeah, my dad's just in his mom's house right now. He's going to be out in just a little bit, though. He told me he's coming back real quick. So I'm going to tell him that you called when he gets back in here, okay? And then beep. That's it. Click done. And then I was just like, I felt pretty good about that. Right? But I messed up. I broke my dad's one rule, and oh man, was I in trouble. Apparently, like his phone obviously had to be blown up, just like, who is this idiot who has a hold of your radio right now? It was his child. And I remember getting home and not only feeling like this disappointment between me and my dad, but I also felt like he had to punish me, right? He was mad, so he had to ground me or something, and there was just this tension because I want love for my dad, but I can feel that I let him down. And you know, there was a moment to where my mom walked in, and she's like the only female in the house amongst like a lot of dudes. So she's the queen of the house. She rules it. What she says goes. And she was just like looking at my dad and trying to calm him down. And it was just this presence that was able to remind my dad that, hey, I'm an idiot, but he should still love me. Okay, because we have messed up before. When we disobey God, there are repercussions. There is something he says don't do that we do, and because of that, that puts separation between us. Because he's just, he has to punish us. But because he loves us, he still wants to be with us. Okay, now get this. Because of Jesus, we have now regained access into that kingdom. He has come to smooth things over for us. He's come to stand between us and God and say, you know what? It's all right. I know they're idiots, but I love them so much. I want you to take the punishment out on me because I know that you want to be with them and I want that relationship to reconcile. So we have been invited now back into the garden to live with God again. And it's not like we've been grown up to teach, right? It's not like God just comes and is like, oh, you believe in Jesus, boom, there's a stamp on your forehead. Now you're going to get to heaven when you die. But it's more like, oh, you believe in Jesus, boom. Now you get to have access into the life you were supposed to have in the first place. Now you can have access to the kingdom that is now that we get to be invited with this life with Jesus to where we can have that peace that surpasses all understanding, or we can have this crazy love that the world doesn't understand, or we can live a life that is so flourishing and beautiful because we know the God who made it all, who originally intended it to be like that. And that really is good news. It's not good news just because it's simply a good story and entertaining, but it has real life implications for you and me right now. Right? He gives us access to the author of life, so what else should we need? I remember when The Joker came out, the new one, I loved it, dude. I went to see it opening day. I was so pumped, and I remember just talking about it a lot afterwards. I'm an introvert by nature, and I can kill conversations very quickly. So that would be my go-to for a few weeks, not because I just had nothing else to talk about, because I was really excited. I liked this movie. I was just like, have you seen Joker? Have you seen Joker? When you go see it? And then all my friends I was talking to would just be like, no, I haven't seen it yet. Is it good? And then I would tell them all about it. Now, listen, again, I am not recommending you go see it. I know it's rated R, and I know that your parents are smarter than I am, so listen to them. Okay, but my point is this. When you hear a good story or something that captivates your imagination and your attention and your heart and your affection, you want to share that with other people, right? And Jesus knew that we eventually would come to the greatest story of all time, to where he took a fallen humanity and reconciled them back together to him. He made a way to where we could come into heaven once more. And that really is the greatest story ever told, not just because it's exciting and it's cool, because it really does affect us right here and right now. And I think that's why Jesus said this. He said, when he was talking to his disciples, he said, I've been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So you see, this is where your story and God's overarching story intersect. This is where your past experiences, your ripples of influence that we talked about last week, your pains, your shames, whatever it may be, this is where it all comes into contact with God's overarching narrative, because he gives us not just a changed life and an invitation to have this brand new way of living, but he also gives us a command. And I've always heard it said, when you come across the word therefore, you need to know what it's there for. Okay, so Jesus gives us a therefore here. He says, therefore, go. Therefore, go and make disciples. You know how God has changed your life, and now that you have this relationship with him, go. Go and bring other people into the fold. Go and share what he's doing in your life. Share this good news with the people around you. If you're a follower of Jesus, I want to speak very frankly to you. I understand that not everybody has that relationship, but if you're a follower of Jesus, this is your job. Okay, this is something that Jesus says to do. There's no way around it. There's not something that you can delegate to your pastor. It's not something to say, I hope he does this for me. No, this is what Jesus tells you to do. This isn't for the church down the street. This isn't for a big mega church that has this crazy awesome band. This is for you, a follower of Jesus. Go and make disciples. And I think a lot of us have heard this voice, or this verse, and it's kind of just in one ear and out the other, but I think we're familiar with it. Heck, it's on one of our shirts that we have, the long sleeve. It's the Great Commission. It's Jesus' command, one of his last few words to his disciples. But I think for whatever reason, you and I, as followers of Jesus, choose to ignore it. But what happens if the people in this room hear these words of Jesus, go and make disciples, and we choose to ignore it? What if the Forge chooses to ignore it? But then what happens when Renovate at First Baptist chooses to ignore it, or Praise chooses to ignore it? What happens when churches all around just kind of take these words of Jesus that used to have so much weight and sway and hold over our lives and say, I don't think that's for me? Life change then withers on the vine, and this world that is just spiraling down into darkness is going to continue to do so because God's people refuse to bring it light. Okay, the ridiculousness of accepting this good news and not having this change for yourself, it's talked about here in Romans. He says this, I want you to understand this logic and this progression he goes through. He says, for everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Good news. But how can they call on him to save them unless they believe in him? And how can they believe in him unless, if they've never heard about him? And how can they hear about him unless someone tells them? And how will anyone go and tell them without being sent? That is why the scriptures say, how beautiful are the feet of messengers who bring good news. You have a story to tell, and consider this you being sent. This is your job. If you want to be an influencer that changes the world, if you are a follower of Jesus who loves him truly and want to follow his commands, you have to just not only tell your story, but tell God's story. And if you're taking notes and you're writing that down, that's what I want you to take away from tonight. To be an influencer, tell God's story, not just your own. Because people everywhere love a good story, and followers of Jesus, we believe that we have the best that's ever been written.